Nobody could last more than a week with the Billionaire pilot's twins, not because they were loud or wild, but because they didn't speak a single word, not to each other, not to anyone, not even to their father, and that silence was heavier than any tantrum could ever be. It was the kind of silence that made the walls seem to lean in and the air feel cold even in summer. Nannies had come and gone, some leaving in tears, some packing in the middle of the night, swearing that the house itself felt cursed. It wasn't just the silence, it was the way the twins, two identical boys with dark storm-colored eyes, would sit in the corner of their sprawling glass-walled playroom, watching, not blinking, almost as if they could see right through you. Their father, Ethan Cross, was as untouchable as the jets he flew, ex-Air Force, now a private pilot for billionaires, and won himself thanks to his high-stakes investment firm. He wasn't unkind, but he was distant, his voice always clipped, his eyes always somewhere else, scanning a horizon no one else could see. Rumors whispered in the staff quarters said he'd lost his wife in a plane crash, that the twins had been there when it happened, and that's why they never spoke, but no one dared ask him outright. The mansion sat on the edge of a cliff in Maine, wind and sea battering it day and night, a place that looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine but felt like it carried ghosts in its bones. When the last nanny left, after finding one of her favorite coffee mugs mysteriously shattered in her locked room, Ethan stopped looking for replacements, until one rainy afternoon when a black pickup truck with military tags rolled up the drive. Inside was Jack Rayner, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s with a scar tracing down from his temple to his jaw, a quiet weight in his gaze, and a boyish grin that looked like it hadn't been used in years. He wasn't there to be a nanny, he was there because he needed work, any work, after leaving the service and finding civilian life colder than the deserts he'd fought in. He'd heard from a friend that Ethan was looking for help, and the pay was more than he'd made in a year overseas. When he stepped inside, dripping from the rain, the twins were there, sitting cross-legged on the polished wood floor of the foyer, staring at him as though they'd been expecting him. Jack didn't flinch under their gaze, he just nodded once, his voice steady as he said, "Hey, fellas." No response, just two pairs of storm-gray eyes locked on him. Ethan appeared on the landing above, dressed in black, every movement precise, assessing Jack like a mission briefing. The interview was short, too short, and before Jack knew it, he was standing in a guest room overlooking the churning sea, told to start tomorrow at dawn. That night, the wind howled like something alive, and Jack lay awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old house. At some point, he thought he heard the faint sound of laughter, childish, high-pitched, but when he opened his door, the hall was empty, and the twins' room was dark. The next morning, he made pancakes, deliberately flipping one badly just to see if they'd react, but the boys just sat there, watching. For 3 days, it was the same, Jack talking into the silence, narrating his cooking, his repairs around the house, telling them stories from the service without any idea if they even understood. But on the 4th morning, something shifted. Jack found them outside at the edge of the cliff, dangerously close to the drop, their hair whipping in the wind, and when he called out, one of them turned, not to look at him, but to point at something far in the distance over the water. Jack squinted, and his stomach dropped. A small plane, trailing smoke, barely visible against the gray sky. Ethan came running from the hangar before Jack could say a word, his face a mask of something between fear and memory. That was the first time Jack saw it, the truth hiding in Ethan's eyes, and the beginning of a storm he didn't yet understand. But in that moment, as the sea roared and the plane in the distance dipped lower, Jack felt two small hands clutch the hem of his jacket, and though no words came, the grip was enough to tell him the twins had just chosen him. The moment the smoke-trailed plane dipped out of sight, Ethan was already moving, barking orders into a radio clipped to his belt, his voice a sharp contrast to the silent fear on the twins' faces, and Jack, trained for years to run toward chaos, grabbed the boys, pulling them back from the cliff's edge as the wind whipped so hard it felt like it might lift them off the ground. Minutes later, Ethan's private hangar roared to life, the gleaming silver body of his personal jet shuddering against the storm, and Jack realized Ethan wasn't calling for help, he was going after whoever was in that plane. Jack had seen that look before, on soldiers who'd lost too much and refused to lose again. But the moment Ethan strapped in and the hangar doors began to open, he glanced at Jack, eyes narrowing, and said something that sounded less like a request and more like an order, "Stay with them. No matter what happens, don't let them out of your sight." The engine screamed, the jet tore down the private strip, and then Ethan was gone into the churning gray sky. Jack turned back to find the twins still staring toward the horizon, their small hands gripping each other so tightly their knuckles had gone white, and for the first time, Jack saw something in their eyes, terror, raw and unguarded. He crouched down in front of them, speaking low, like he would to a frightened child on the battlefield. "He'll be back. You hear me? He's coming back." And though neither spoke, one of them reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, pressing it into Jack's palm before walking silently back toward the mansion. Jack waited until they were inside to open it. The handwriting was shaky, childish, but the words made his stomach clench. "Don't let them find us." That night, the storm worsened, the power flickered, and Ethan didn't come back. Jack moved the twins into the library, a room with a heavy oak door and a fireplace he kept burning, and sat up between them as they slept, the paper still in his pocket, the weight of it heavier than any weapon he'd carried. Just past midnight, the crunch of tires on gravel broke the rhythm of the rain. Jack's hand went to the hunting knife on the mantel. A black SUV rolled into view, no lights, no plates. Two men in dark coats stepped out, moving with the calm confidence of people who knew exactly where they were going. Jack didn't wait. He slipped out of the library, crossing the hall to intercept them, his voice cold steel. "House is private. You need to leave." The taller one smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes, and said, "We're here for the boys." The storm outside howled, but inside it was silent enough to hear the twins' footsteps on the stairs. Jack didn't turn, didn't take his eyes off the men, just said loud enough for the boys to hear, "Back upstairs. Now." But instead of retreating, they came down, one clutching the other's hand, and in that moment Jack understood, they weren't afraid of him, they were afraid of these men. The shorter one reached inside his coat. Jack moved first. Years of combat training took over. In a blur, the taller man hit the wall, the shorter one's wrist was twisted until the gun clattered to the floor. But before Jack could demand answers, a voice from behind froze him in place. "Let them go, Rayner." Ethan. Standing in the doorway, drenched, eyes darker than the storm outside. The two men straightened, adjusted their coats, and walked past Ethan without a word, vanishing into the rain. Jack was left in the hallway, heart pounding, the twins pressed against his legs. Ethan closed the door, locked it, then finally met Jack's eyes and said, "If you stay, you're in this for real. This isn't about babysitting anymore. It's about keeping them alive." Jack looked down at the boys, their fingers gripping his as if he was the only thing tethering them to safety, and knew there was no walking away now. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock chimed, the storm eased, and for the first time, one of the twins whispered, so soft Jack almost missed it, "Don't leave us." And that was it, the wall had cracked, the silence was broken, and the war Jack thought he'd left overseas had just found him here on the edge of the sea. If you want to know who those men were, what Ethan was hiding, and why the twins had been silent all this time, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next chapter will change everything.